So when news got out yesterday that the Pistons were bringing back Joe Johnson after he'd spent a year out of the NBA, the first thing you heard from a lot of players was, wow, good for him. The second set of texts I got from players was, now what about Melo? So fine, let's talk about Melo. One of the top 20 scorers of all time, he is a 10-time All-Star, 3-time Olympic champion, NCAA champion. He's also the guy who was chased out of Madison Square Garden by a Knicks organization that seemed inexplicably hell-bent on diminishing his trade value before they traded him. Then Oklahoma City, where he fit like a sweater that was 2 sizes too small. There was the infamous, hey, P, they want me to come off the bench moment right at the start of that season. And at the end of that season, well, there was Melo on the sideline, crestfallen. He couldn't get subbed back into a playoff game. The Thunder clearly, and it turned out rightly, thought they had a better chance of winning without him. And it got even worse in Houston. Despite that great summer of hoodie Melo workouts, yeah, he even wore the hoodie on the beach at that players-only preseason trip to the Bahamas, and lots of talk about Melo being able to accept his role, the Rockets spent the first month of that season in a total freefall, and the coaches decided instead of watching to see if he could really handle sitting at the end of the bench, they just sent him away instead. What followed was an entire season of Melo just sitting at home, dangling, his reputation taking a beating. By the time we got to this summer, all Melo wanted was to find a team to finish his career with. Except no one has wanted him. Even USA Basketball didn't want him for its FIBA World Cup team. Despite that nearly every other big-name player on the roster had dropped out, despite that this was an organization he had given his heart and soul to. I mean, the man sat on a plane and listened to Jimmy Butler and Kyrie Irving sing at him. And that still wasn't enough for Team USA to feel that they owed him. I mean, come on. Still, though, players in the NBA have kept pushing for Melo. When Miles Turner wrote a heartfelt Twitter post about how hard Team USA had fought in China, Markieff Morris answered him, LOL, should have let Melo play. There's been video of Melo in pickup games. Here he is crossing up 2-time NBA champion Danny Green. And the guys who have played with him in these summer runs keep vouching for him. Kyle Kuzma told the LA Times, quote, Melo is easily better than half the league right now. There's no question about it. He should be on a team right now. The Athletic's Frank Isola also reports that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving have been pushing for the Nets to sign Melo. And considering the Nets also reportedly had their eye on Joe Johnson, and he is, as noted, now off the board, does that mean Melo is in fact a risk that Brooklyn should take? That, of course, depends in part on Melo. He sat on the First Take set earlier this summer and decreed he was happy to take a bench role. And of course, it's okay to ask if he really means it. Personally, I think he does. He watched Dwayne Wade do it last season. I also think he's finally come to terms with no longer trying to be a part of a team in contention for a championship, something a guy like, say, Vince Carter realized a couple years ago, which has allowed him to keep playing. What Melo is now is someone who can provide a little bit of punch to someone's second unit, who can be a real draw for fans, who can pass along, at this point, very hard-earned wisdom to the next generation. And certainly, if you look at his numbers, even just over the past 2 seasons, they are in line or better than with a chunk of the players who do have jobs right now. For example, there have been some comparisons out there this summer between Melo and Jared Dudley. And here are the stats. And no, I am not suggesting the Lakers made a mistake in taking Dudley over Melo. The spotlight in LA, it's already so hot that I get the Lakers fearing Melo would turn it into something flat-out combustible. And maybe that's what most teams are afraid of in general. But if you look at the numbers, not every team should be afraid of that. I mean, let's be honest. There are plenty of NBA markets who could use a little more spotlight, right? And they could get it with a basketball player who does still have some hoop in him. The bottom line is that someone's answer to, okay, now what about Melo, should probably be, why not? Richard, what do you think? Why do you think Melo isn't in the league anymore, and do you think he should be?
I think he should be. I think he's done everything that he could to up until this point to just let people know, like, hey, I'm willing to accept it. Now, don't forget in that interview, he also said there was a little bit of a lack of maturity at certain points in time in his career. And I think right now that, the NBA is constantly evolving, is constantly changing. And I just really believe that now that he's willing to accept it, I think he just needs to wait a little bit longer. Joe Johnson went out and played in the Big Three, dominated the Big Three, was best player out there, hitting game-winning shots, and they were like, okay, we can use this, right? But Joe also never had that hit. Joe had been coming off the bench for years. Joe had already accepted that role many years prior, same with Vince Carter. So I think Melo will get an opportunity to play basketball again. It just might not be when he wants on his terms.
The biggest concern I think the league has for him right now. Stephen A. Smith said this in an interview this week that he spoke to an NBA coach who said, I can't look down the bench and have a Hall of Famer sitting there and be reluctant to play him, because then it becomes a storyline. Say he doesn't want to play him in a blowout, or say he wants to develop a younger guy, then there's questions about why is Carmelo Anthony, the Hall of Famer, not playing, rather than why is Carmelo Anthony, the role player, not playing. I think it's the weight of that reputation that is causing teams to be reticent right now. I don't think it's right. I think he should be in the NBA.
Did you see that
resume? Did you see that resume?
That resume is so sick.
And even the USA Basketball, I think of all the things that you should be, if you want to look at, and again, I know USA Basketball is moving on, but here you have Jerry Colangelo talking about, I'm not going to forget who wouldn't come. And yes,
guess
Carmelo,
who would come over and over again.
Carmelo,
over and over
again. And even if this was like, hey, Carmelo, this will be the last time. Just come, be this. We can't guarantee that you're going to play and this and that. That was the one that I think probably was the most eye-opening. Now, it's not Coach K, it's Pop now, so he's going a different route. But still, when you are complaining about the guys that won't come and a guy that is the greatest Olympian in the history of American basketball not being able to even get an invite, that's kind of eye-opening. That was the one I feel like probably hurts the most.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.